Okay, so most of us are back from summer. A lot of us aren't, and many of us are still hoping for that Indian summer in September. Meanwhile, I am already really starting to crave the fall spices. I don't know if it's because it's the weather here, but we're kind of through the heat wave. It's starting to get a little chilly. It's getting darker, and I'm just gonna say it. I am starting to feel very Halloween-y, and I've been saying it all year. Halloween, like big things are gonna be happening during this Halloween. Not just for me, but I feel like for everybody. Anyway, kismet things aside. Today, we're sitting down with Matthew and Terces Engelhart, the founders of Cafe Gratitude and Gracias, Madre. Pretty sure everyone has sat their butt down one of their establishments and have experienced the wonder that is good food. They're also the co-authors behind the book Sacred Commerce, Business as a Path of Awakening. Not to mention their home turf. It's this all-encompassing practice of regenerative living on their biodynamic Be.Love.Farm. This just to mention a few of the multitude of avenues through which they serve in their purpose. You know the opening scene in Love Actually? That's kind of how I feel about this episode, or more specifically, Matthew and Terces. Now, I may sound a lot less sexy than Hugh Grant, I'll bet just as mushy in saying this, but there's no better way to describe these two as anything other than the simple acknowledgement of human love. This is Amen to Abundance with Matthew and Terces Engelhart. A quick heads up, we're dealing with an overseas conversation here, so the audio may reflect this. Coming to you from Northern California in Amsterdam, the Netherlands.
Well, I had an amazing childhood. My parents were great, and I'd say one of the formative things about my life is when I was like 6 years old. My parents' best friends got killed in a car accident, and they had made an agreement to take their children if anything happened to them. So our family went from 4 to 9 overnight. I think this got me very used to the idea of community. And, as an adult, I've lived in community my entire life. And my childhood was very, our house was always full of people. We traveled a lot. We lived in Germany and Austria for a year each. Happy, great. Nothing. No demon in my childhood that I'm still carrying forward. Lived in a small town in upstate New York with, very little crime. And my parents were political radicals and kind of agnostic atheists, but they started a Unitarian church. So it was eclectic and great and fun, and I rebelled, and in high school I read Autobiography of a Yogi and said, this is my party, and my rebellion was God. Yeah.
And you lived in a teepee?
And I lived in a teepee out of high school. Didn't go to college. Both my parents were professors. Didn't go to college.
And what was that like? That family dynamic like from all of a sudden there's all these other children around you and you're trying to find your place within the family dynamic?
Well, I think for my mother it was difficult. I think for the older children in the family that lost their parents. I think it was very difficult for the children that lost their parents, of course. I think my parents did the best they could. I think back in the early 60s we didn't have the tools and the wherewithal to process grief. I think there was a strategy of just kind of moving on back then, and for me it was fine, and I know that it wasn't completely smooth for that other family, but that other family was our best friends. They lived a block away, so we were all already very close. I think everyone did the best they could. And but for me, it wasn't. I don't remember it being traumatic at all.
And did you find that in what ways were you there for those other children?
I was 7. So, uh, yeah, how was I there for that? I know that all of a sudden I had a younger sister who was, 2 or 3 when this happened. And I'd say I teased her incessantly and probably excessively. I don't think I was particularly there for them at that moment, but we're still family. That sister's coming to visit next month.
I mean, that's beautiful that your family expanded in this way through such a tragedy, but that is still how humans connect.
Yeah, and I think it kind of set in motion a community-based mindset for me, because another interesting story about me is my brother and I married identical twins, and we lived in one house with one wallet and one checkbook for, you don't have checks anymore, but one bank account for 8 years. Yeah, just another one of those merging, melting stories, right?
Yeah.
And so let's see here. I grew up in a military family. I've moved a lot in my life. And I'm the youngest of 3 girls. And let's see, I would say, my dad was a very patient, kind, fair, honest man. And my mom kind of ran a tight show, and actually had to, because she was oftentimes alone. And we lived, she lived in Haiti when there wasn't much development there. We lived in Cuba pre-Castro. And so, but I grew up as an athlete. So my sister and I were swimmers. And, I grew up as an athlete, but then I was abused at 16 by a military physician and kept it a secret to protect him. So then I lived with an eating disorder from 16 to 36. And then, my journey with, I grew up in a Christian home and was always very drawn to the story of Jesus. But then in the years of addiction, really, I was just kind of running and hiding and surviving. And then began my recovery 33 years ago when I was 36. And again, that was like drawing closer once again to God, and really like a spiritual awakening, walking me out of those 20 years. And then my life's really been about giving back, working with young people. I primarily spent most of my adult years working with people between the ages of 16 and 36. And still do. I still do. I teach at our local church's leadership program, and most of our employees fall within those ranges. And Cafe Gratitude really was an opportunity to serve and give back and create a healthy environment for people to heal and grow and wake up. Yeah. So great. Amazing childhood. My parents we did amazing things and traveled a lot, sang and camped, and, great life. And I would say from the teenage years on, it was challenging. Again, in the 50s and 60s, people didn't talk about their problems. Eating disorders weren't even a thing. Nobody really knew what they were. People hid, they hid the discrepancies in perfection. And so, I'd say those were the most difficult and challenging times. And, the recovery's been miraculous and amazing.
Do you know why that trauma manifested in a way that led to an eating disorder?
Well, I think anytime you keep secrets, you feel like things are out of control. It was really a big betrayal. There was actually quite a premeditated setup for it. So I would say, I grew up in a home where my mother definitely was driven by perfection and grew up as a competitive athlete. So there was, just the predisposition for it was there. My mother, food was how she showed her love for you. I'd say, so there were lots of markers for kind of destined to that. My sister My sister, while her story is slightly different than mine, my sister struggled with alcoholism most of her life. My other sister was a smoker. So again, I think when you live in an environment and you're raised in an environment where it isn't safe to be transparent, where there isn't a lot of, open, honest conversation about challenges and difficulties, I think they always manifest in some type of dis-ease. And today I think we're seeing it as, depression, obesity, sensitivity, suicide. I mean, I think it's not gone away. It's just expressing itself differently. And there's still, an ever-increasing number of people struggling with food issues. And food issues are still masked in our world of, body perfection through exercise, working out, superfoods. It's not like it's gone away.
Yep, and we're seeing the gut, so it's such a prevalent factor in so many health issues today. So we're slowly attuning ourselves to who we are physically, mentally, spiritually. Having heard all of this, I'd love to hear how you would say both describe each other as you are today.
You mean you want me to describe Terces, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So Terces is probably, let's see, Terces lives, she puts love in action as much as anyone I've ever met. Like, she is not like talk about love, but actually serve love and show up in action. And I think in her community, she is known as someone who walks her talk and actually has I think the minister of her church actually acknowledged her for upping the bar, raising the bar in the whole church community. It's a huge community, about 5,000 people. She single-handedly has raised the bar on what it is to be love and do love. So that's how I would describe her.
I would describe Matthew as a seeker. Like, I think he's always seeking. I think all of us want to love and be loved, and we want to belong, and I think that's kind of a lifelong journey for all human beings, however that might look. But I would say Matthew is a seeker. He's definitely a rebel, and he's probably one of the most generous human beings I know. He loves to contribute to other people, and he doesn't really miss too many opportunities where we can, support, encourage, invest in, guide. So we're kind of always reaching out and looking for ways in which we can make a difference in someone else's life. I think he's really committed and on a quest to, live free of, or as free as possible, of the demands of the ego, which I think probably lead to also his extreme generosity. I would say that's probably his primary focus is embodying more of God consciousness and less of egoic, distractions. So he's, does deep internal commitment, deep internal work, and at the same time, he's very generous, in the communities we walk in.
And how did you both meet?
We met at Landmark Education, which is you should know it. In Holland they have it, but it's a transformational business that's been going on they provide workshops worldwide, and they do something called the Landmark Forum. But we were both in a course at Landmark.
I was coaching a course, and Matthew was in a course, and I went on to be on staff there. And Matthew, we were both stepping into and being trained up in leadership when we fell in love and realized we didn't want to be separate our whole life, traveling all over the world. And so that was really what birthed Cafe Gratitude was. We knew we were committed to transformation. We wanted to find a vehicle. We felt like it would be awesome if people could be transformed around great food and a kitchen table. And that was really the initial concept and perception of Cafe Gratitude.
So how have you found that you've built upon each other's weaknesses within your partnership?
Well, I would say that, we're very different, and yet we have very similar commitments. And so, if you participate in a workshop of ours, you can see that we can finish each other's sentences, but more so than that, we each bring a perspective that enhances the other person's perspective. So I'd say the combination of our voice is much more powerful than either of our voices individually. And
I would say, so I'd say one of the things that Tercess didn't have before she met me was the idea of abundance, and that, spirit is an abundance, and abundant has all the qualities of abundance, and that money is just an expression of that, and that, that money can be spiritized, that it doesn't have to be always on the fallen side of life, and mostly it is, but
well, that was really your dedication and commitment before we met. Was your spiritual path was spiritizing money.
Yeah, so I had done a lot of work around completely changing the money conversation internally, and I think Tercess hadn't had that piece yet, and so in terms of like her, that was, we'll call it a weakness, that she really took that and flew with it, and out of that we created Cafe Gratitude and so forth.
Sacred Commerce, Gracias, Madre. Yeah. Really, what Matthew and I have done together in our lives over the 16 years we've been together has been birth the community known as Cafe Gratitude and Gracias Madre, which is much more vast than just the people who come in and dine with us and the people who work with us, the team of people who work with us, because we've led workshops all over, and so the community is vast and far-reaching, more so than any of us know. And that's really what we've done with our life, is kind of build, sustain, encourage, and support the growth of that community. And still, that's what we do.
And Tercess has the stamina perseverance thing. Her animal medicine is elk stamina, and I hit a wall, and I'm like, let's let go of this. And she's like,
let's go through with this.
That's right.
Yeah, so I would say both of us share the quality of we'll do whatever it takes to get something up and going. And I would say Matthew is a quicker initiator, and I'm a more sustained finisher.
Yeah.
Yeah. And before the book, Sacred Commerce, correct me if I'm wrong, but the two of you created a board game called The Abounding River?
Correct. Yeah, that was before everything. That was the first thing. We were really trusting God, or trusting spirit, or trusting inner guidance, however people identify that. And the first insight that we received was invent a transformational board game. And neither of us we don't even play board games, and neither of us were board game inventors. But that journey of creating that board game over a year really was the foundation of Cafe Gratitude, because we ended up creating this board game, and then we were like, well, what are we going to do with these 500 games? And we thought, well, we'll create a little cafe where we have coffee and croissants or great baked goods, pulling from Matthew loved coffee. I had bakery skills, and people will come in and play the game is really the initial idea. And then, ultimately it became a raw food cafe. And then, the board game was embedded in the tables, and people actually came in to play the game and eat raw food. and be transformed through, the affirmations on the menu and the question of the day and a lot of the things that we had built into that model. And that's how it all began. And then it grew quickly, and then we went through our betrayal process, and then we moved to LA, and it expanded there, and now we're looking at going out of state.
Just going back to the board game, though, quickly, what did you want, say, the players to acknowledge and come to realize whilst playing the board game?
Well, the board game is really about how do you keep your attention on qualities of the divine, however you express that, like generosity, gratitude, worth, love, acceptance, abundance. How do you keep your attention on qualities of the divine and not get distracted by the day-to-day circumstances of life? And that really is the basis of Cafe Gratitude. How do you keep your attention on being grateful no matter what? And we just happen to use the model of a restaurant in which to practice that. That's really what we do, is we've created a commercial environment for people to actually practice keeping their attention on the qualities that bring out and affirm the best in us rather than complain, worry, stress.
I feel as a humanity, we're seeking something, and that's our purpose. And as a primitive chain reaction to that, we've come to see the development of a global workforce, which is just commonly broken down into the 4 types of industry. But it really speaks to the numerous forms of human interest, and that to some extent the structure which we've come to operate under, our professions could serve as a mirror to where we are in the spiritual spectrum. And so this being said, I really want to know why you took to the workforce as a means to introduce sacred commerce, as opposed to, say, holding lectures throughout schools or educational establishments and furthering this message.
Well, most people spend
90,000 hours in a life at work.
Oh, yeah. So we spend most of our life at work, most of our awake life at work. So it seems like work is a much better place to, if we can get a transformational environment in at work, that seems like a way more powerful thing than a lecture, which is theoretical, rather than where the rubber hits the road. Application, something that actually produces something. Can you produce something? Can you be productive and at the same time transform your life, rather than some theory of a lecture? But by the way, we have done trainings in schools in Mexico, so it's not that it isn't applicable to school, but we felt like commerce, we spend most of our life in some kind of commerce. So
and also I would say, we didn't want it to be you go to work and then you invest in your personal growth on your free time. We actually wanted to work on not increasing that split of work play or work growth, but get that it's one life, and that work is an amazing opportunity and an optimal environment to do personal growth because you're in relationship, particularly in the service industry, which we're in, the service and hospitality. And then there's the element, because of course coming from my background, there's the element of we really led the way in healthy plant-based food. 16 years ago, there wasn't commercial almond milk or cold processed coffee or green juice like there is now. So we kind of forged our way so that we also could provide the healthy nutrition, which supports the internal work. It's tough to do internal work if you're living on processed foods, caffeine, and sugar. And so it was that kind of magical combination. And then also the element of finances, when money's involved in it, because a lot of our initial work was in that realm, what Matthew was sharing with you about abundance. When he shared with me and I learned about this kind of abundant thinking, which by the way is not manifestation, then I was like, well, let's share this with everyone, because it's another quality Matthew and I have is when we're exposed to something, when we see something that we think is, has an advantage, we've experienced the advantage in our life, both of us are called then to share it with other people. So initially our work was very much around viewing life from an abundant point of view. That
rather than scarcity.
Yeah,
Consider that
that's probably what we need to go back to.
As human beings, we're born into scarcity. Not enough money, not enough time, not enough beauty, not enough intelligence, not enough love.
That scarcity model, yes.
Yeah.
And so we the first restaurant over the door, it said a world of plenty. Our primary focus was developing an abundant mindset, of which being grateful gives you access to. You can't experience the abundance of all of life when you're not being grateful. So those two were the primary focus. And a commercial setting, a commercial environment, which also included healthy food, was, really what we were guided to do, and ultimately what became such a fertile growing ground for, what we're now calling sacred commerce.
And touching back on that point of manifestation, what would you say to those who would argue and have adopted the mindset that being on that higher vibrational level, because they are operating from a place of I am abundance, and therefore would be pulling that energy towards them? What would you say to those people, and that it is actually not manifestation?
Well, you want to go, Ben?
Well, so that's all very, very, very egoic. No, God is abundant. God is completely abundant, and all we need to do is get out of the way and realize that. That's very different than I'm going to create a parking place. Like, that's all ego-driven. That's all egoic will. So it's about getting in. It's about realizing that you live in an abundance universe. You were born into an abundance universe. It was here before you were here, and it's just a matter of shifting your attention from scarcity to abundance.
See, it's so interesting, because in some ways you can hear the overlap, but I think you just have to be careful. It's not like you make it. It's like you actually get out of the way and begin to see it, but it's already here. It's simply that your attention is your greatest worship power, and your attention gets captivated by lack more often than it gets captivated by plenty. And when you can learn to manage your attention and keep it on how unbelievably abundantly we are provided for, then more shows up. But you can't be looking for it. And I think my rub against the manifestation thinking is you do something in order to, and that actually is manipulation, not manifestation. And so it's not that you do something in order to, it's that, no, God's already done it. It's already here. And what there is for us to do is manage how easily we get distracted to insufficiency instead of abundance, which has already been provided for us.
It's actually easier to see with love. You don't manifest love. You clean up your act, and love fills the space. Love is a quality of the universe. It's infinite, and it's just a matter of you getting your perception sorted out. And love is there. Love is there. Love is always there. It's the same with abundance. So, the whole New Age manifestation thing is a little bit puts the ego kind of in charge, and that's a slippery slope.
It's almost, in a way, playing God a little bit and taking and and claiming that space for yourself.
And you got to be careful about that.
Yeah. And so, what did that look like in translating this dialogue to your first employees and the people that really came on board during those early days to form that basis team?
Well, it was exciting and fascinating, because basically we had, a small crew, 11, 12 people of
Street gypsies.
We say that term with
From
love, right? With affection. Street gypsies, oftentimes young people who wouldn't have considered themselves the most employable. They were rebels. They were people that were seeking. They were looking for something different.
They were dumpster divers.
And so we took that group of people and really we played the game together. We did a lot of work together in really looking at what is it in us that gets in the way of us realizing how amazingly provided for we are, regardless of what your life might look like. And they actually were up for the game. They played full out. Not everyone stayed on board. Some people didn't. Some of those people are still in our community. So it was exciting. It was fascinating. It was future creating, and it really altered those people's lives and thousands of people after them in their view of life.
And so within this, communication is so key, and it's people doing the work on themselves, but then also learning how to communicate with others. And so I'd love to know what a typical team building exercise would look like at the cafe.
Well, the most team building exercise we've done every single day for 16 years with every single employee to the best of our ability, and it's called clearing. And it's still what we do. And it's a brief, we allow 10 minutes on the clock for two people. And it's a brief conversation where you simply ask someone what's distracting them. There's lots of ways you can do that, but ask someone what's distracting them. Let them share with you. Repeat back what they said without coaching, adding, subtracting, empathizing, sympathizing. Simply mirror back to them what they said. And then ask them when their attention is on that, how do they feel? So you move someone from their head, from a mental concept or construct into their heart, which is, an emotional state. And then repeat back to them the emotions that come up, that surface when their attention's on that. Thank them for sharing. And then the second question is a question that brings them into the here, the now. What are you grateful for was the question we asked for years until people wanted more variety. And now we have lots of ways of basically saying, what are you grateful for? And then acknowledging the person. And acknowledgement is one of the tools of calling forth the best in another person. Instead of looking for what's not working, acknowledge those intrinsic values that we all have that oftentimes go unexpressed and unrecognized. And the truth is we can shift any community with the tool of acknowledgement. We still do that every single day in our restaurants with 700 and some people.
And how it creates community is that people really share deeply because it's a safe space. And the only way that human beings ever connect is by sharing their fallenness, their foibles, their human experience, their humanity. And so it creates this glue in the community where everyone, first of all, it's safe, and it's safe to tell one on yourself. It's safe to, people feel heard, really heard, like we got in each other's world, and it creates a community that's like no other work community. Better than family, because in family, a lot of times people aren't good at listening to each other. So, it's very effective.
And we continue to, we've built this farm up in Vacaville. We bring managers and employees here for training and incentives. So we continue to develop the communication skills of our people, because you're absolutely right. It all happens in communication. And, you see in Sacred Commerce, there's a whole gamut of tools that we teach. We call them the 10 tools for a powerful or grateful community. And we still teach those. And it's always what we'll be doing, because you get them in, they fall out. You get them in, they fall out. Because human beings have an amazing capacity for taking things for granted and not necessarily keeping in place things that support them most. And so we're here always on the sidelines, encouraging and coaching and supporting our people in keeping those tools in and actually using and applying them in their life.
People, all they want at the end of the day is to truly be acknowledged and loved, and that they have a hand to hold.
Absolutely.
Given that both of you have the years that you have been in this, just how have you seen the masculine and feminine energy differ in terms of communication and teamwork?
Well, I think, we end up being, quite frankly, in the early days, we ended up being and holding the projection of everyone for their mother and father, because, Matthew holds more of that masculine position and I hold more of that compassionate, loving mother position. But really it's how that works is, I would say it's simply loving people where they're at without judgment, and then helping them see a new way to see things wherever they might be stuck or stopped in their life. I don't think we focus on masculine and feminine energies so much as, just really looking at what's next for that person. How does that person rise above whatever what might be stopping or blocking them?
But we did go back and forth often between being too nurturing and cutting employees too much slack into the feminine, and then we'd swing into the masculine discipline, policy agreements, and we would get heavy in the masculine, and then we would swing back to the more receptive.
And that's more as organization.
As an organization. And that's, I think,
still there.
It's always a balance. It's a razor's edge to live in that balance between the masculine and the feminine.
Yeah. Yeah, you need the both. And I'd just like to preface that it doesn't matter, say, what you identify as. It's just what you...
In fact, 16 years ago, there wasn't a lot of conversation about what you identify as.
But now we're finally in a space where people can come forth, and not all of us are able to do that, and there's acknowledgement towards that, and that spaces such as yours are safe.
Yes.
Yeah, because partly what that's about is just loving people where they're at.
Yeah.
Love is all-inclusive. Love does not exclude anyone.
Yeah.
And that's important for people to remember. If it does, it's not love.
Exactly.
Because we're distinguishing it.
And so now that we know a little bit more of the dialogue with the people working at your establishments, I'd love to know how you've gone about countering the customer and the employee experience. Like, if a person enters an establishment and they come in with a certain energy, a certain vibe that just, they're there for the food, but that's all it is. And there's this constant argument of, it's too woo-woo in quotation marks. Everyone always loves to say it's too woo-woo or it's too out there. How have you approached that?
Well, I would say that in the early days, we had much more of that because we were. But now, life has expanded, and we've also become more more organized, more systems, less, very much less woo-woo. So I don't know that we ever hear that. I'd say there are people way more woo-woo than we are, or than our company is. But I would say, again, it doesn't matter. Love them where they're at. Love them, serve them, be grateful for them, praise them. It doesn't matter if you want to come in just for the food and you're overwhelmed and irritated by the affirmations. Great. We don't confront that. We just love you where you're at.
Yeah, it's about being present wherever they're at. So the hummus is called I Am Happy, or used to be. So somebody comes in and goes, I don't want to be happy, I just want the hummus. And you just say, great. So what I hear you say is, you don't want to be happy and you want the hummus. Coming right up. And then when you bring the hummus out, you say, you are happy.
I love that.
That's the rubble.
If you don't mind my asking, in having kickstarted the business, which is radically different to the norm here, I'd say here especially, I don't see businesses and their internal structures being set up in a way at all to like yours, which is just, I've been to, when I was in California, Los Angeles, I loved Cafe Gratitude so much. I mean, it was a second home. Lunch, like dinner, breakfast, like everything in between. I loved it. But how have you seen this translate in terms of sales and the company's bottom line?
Well,
we believe that love is measurable and that it is a part of the bottom line. And, we've had our successes and we've had our failures.
I mean, basically, dollars are just votes, right? People are voting for your product by giving you their dollars. So, and there's some places where people get it more and they vote. Like, I don't know if you went to the Cafe Gratitude in Venice on Rose, but, that's like the yogina capital of the world, and that restaurant just rocks it, and people vote for that. They want to have that experience. In Orange County, we have a restaurant. Orange County is different. Orange County is not so yogini woo-woo. They're more, they're more like
cocktails and steak.
Cocktail steaks and Maserati. So it's a little bit harder. We're a little bit of an outpost there, and there aren't as many votes.
You're still finding your tribe.
We're still creating the tribe. So it's different in different places, but we just keep showing up and serving love and
trusting that people will discover it and experience it.
Yeah. Have we had to close restaurants? Yes. Might we close restaurants in the future? Yes. Sorry, it's part of the game.
Not everybody gets it.
I'd love to talk more then on how the scaling of the business and making sure that Cafe Gratitude and Gracias Madre now as well, like what steps did you take to make sure that the integrity wasn't compromised?
First of all, we're always doing that, and we're always failing at that and always succeeding at that. So, but to start with, the food is always organic.
Well, we can't even say that anymore, so.
We can say it's organic sourced, but anyway, because of the laws. Anyway, in terms of the food, it's the highest. We have a big stake in the ground. It's with very little compromise when it comes to
the source of our food.
Source of our food. When it comes to, treating our paying our employees, there's some challenges there because in California, you can't offset wages with tips and gratuities. I know in Europe, you guys don't have this tip or gratuity problem, but in California, you have to pay the front of the house and the back of the house, the minimum wage, which is, I don't know, like say $15. But the servers in the front of the house get the tips, and you can't share them with the back of the house. And so there's the front of the house employees, which are usually older immigrants, people that have been in the United States a while, are making $30, $40 an hour, and back of the house is maybe topping out at $18 an hour, something like that. And so you have a little bit of an unfairness, but that's the law, and we're always trying to impact that because it creates a culture, back of the house, front of the house culture. So that's a place where our hands are a little bit tied, and we're always taking little steps and little adjustments to make that more fair. But in terms of integrity,
I think just what you said, babe. You notice when it goes out, you put it back in. We're a business. We have a business structure. We have handbooks. We have policies. We have procedures. We have all of the elements that a normal business has. And then we also have compassion and empathy. And we see the opportunity to train people and being honest and showing up and seeing that they're valued and an important member of a team. So we have all of those elements. And we're utilizing both customer interaction and then team building to actually build the skill set that would have people be, their best person. And we serve and deal with a lot of people, so we're always putting the correction in. And our biggest mistake has probably been keeping people that don't want to play the game we're playing too long. And we've learned that lesson over and over again because we have a tendency to over-believe in the goodness of people, and sometimes people aren't up for actually
changing their attitude,
having their life, be founded on goodness.
And that life's an inside job.
And that it can't be done to them. They actually have to participate with us.
Yeah. And do you feel that the careers people are choosing and the integral structures of brands, as well as the way in which they interact these days, are maturing in a way that facilitates human connectivity and empathy?
Oh, I don't know. I think it depends on where you put your focus, right? I would say, in some ways, I'd say yes, much more than before being, just our experience. And in other ways, I'd say, it's harder for people to build a face-to-face connection because people are so used to screen relationships. And so again, but I see that as an opportunity for us to up our game and help people really learn the value of personal interaction versus electronic connection.
And so you've introduced this way of living, really. It's a lifestyle.
Absolutely.
And I'd love to know how you've seen it impact, on a more personal level, your family.
Well, I think, both of our sons, two of our sons married customers.
Really?
We have 13, we have 11 grandchildren, 2 more on the way before Christmas, so we'll have 13 grandchildren.
Oh, wow.
We all work together. We're all each other's best friends. Our favorite vacation is the one we take together every year. There's, I think, 23, soon to be 25 of us, and just first line children, spouses, and grandkids. I would say, while we've got 5 children that each have raised their children slightly differently, all the kids are amazing and they get along and they love to be together.
I'd say sometimes our kids feel like they get neglected because we have they have to share us with a big community.
We live in a farm, so even when they come, it's not just hang out with grandma and grandpa. There's, 6 or 7 or 8 other people here that are kind of incorporated into the extended family. So I would say it's had a huge impact. We have interest, if you count our kids' restaurants, we have interest in 14 restaurants now. So, we're a foodie family, and we all eat well and we love well. And I would say, we're really good at appreciating and accepting each other's differences and still all getting along and having love be the common denominator. And we have Oaxacans. Our daughter married her cook. So we have 2 little Oaxacan grandchildren, gonna have a third. Our family vacation's in Oaxaca this year where we'll get to go meet Elias's family. Yeah, so it's a very eclectic, loving, vivacious, community, called family.
That's the dream. That's what I dream of. That's amazing. It's an entire family affair. And I love to know what a day looks like at the farm. It's called Be.Love.Farm.
Yeah, so we camped out here for 8 years and didn't have a house. We lived in a yurt, and we had an outdoor bath and a composting toilet and kind of a funky outdoor kitchen. And now 12 years later, we have a beautiful community farmhouse. We have an updated bathhouse and an updated outdoor kitchen. We still have the composting toilet. And pretty much, we start the day with, I milk cows, make cheese, and, we live with apprentices, people who are learning farming or advancing in their farming skills. Our primary focus is regenerating our soil, like building and supporting soil health. We grow a lot of food. We have a little farm store on the farm. And it's a combination of, conference calls, podcasts, farming chores. We have 2 meals in community, so feeding people, preparing food, preserving food, and then supporting the local community in, ways that we do that here. So when we're home, that's what it looks like. And, when we're not here, we're usually working with our restaurant, restaurant community and training and supporting them. So, yeah, it's an amazing life. We make bread, we make cheese, we make pizzas. We care for sheep and cows and chickens and ducks and people and dogs. It's great. You should come sometime. We also host people here a lot. We do events. We have Airbnb. It's kind of a combination of lots of different expressions of loving people and inviting people into our world.
I mean, there's just a multitude of avenues through which you just express love.
Yeah, exactly.
And touching on regenerative agriculture, if we could maybe lay the basis on what that form of farming looks like and why it's integral, why it is so integral these days.
Well, basically, agriculture is the most degrading and polluting industry on the planet, and it's done more to impact the planet than any other enterprise. As you probably remember from school, Sahara Desert used to be the grain bowl of the Roman Empire, and where civilization started was called the Fertile Crescent, which is that area that kind of goes from Syria through Iraq. Well, there's nothing fertile about that area of the world now because we have degraded the soil and desertified the soil. So that's still going on. It's happening all over the world. And it's only because we have this global food system that it's not as apparent as it could be. But basically, the regenerative agriculture is that we can actually grow food on a particular, we can steward land in a way that we can grow food on it, and each year the carrying capacity of the soil, the life carrying capacity of the soil will be increased, not decreased. So rather than, agriculture is a degrading proposition, and there's a lot of conversation about sustainability, but sustainability is just sustaining a degraded system. There's actually ways of farming where each year you're increasing the yield, you're increasing the carrying capacity of that property, and still produce food. And that's what regenerative agriculture is. It's using the principles of nature to produce our food rather than the principles of
mankind.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to ask, what are your favorite recipes? It's spring, summer's coming. There's just living with the seasonal produce that you're seeing come into bloom. How are you putting these to use in the kitchen?
Well, right now we have asparagus, so we're enjoying asparagus. We have a big wood-fired pizza oven, so we make sourdough pizza with asparagus and other toppings on it. That's pretty good.
Right now we're just beginning really. A spring garden. We're planting, but we still have we have lettuces and kale, but mostly it's just green and lush. Remember, we don't get rain in our summer months. We're just coming out of our rain, which is winter, and it's beautiful and it's green and the ground's soft. And there's birds everywhere. It's just so lush. Flowers. It's such a lush time of year. And soon we'll be swimming in, late spring, early summer produce.
And one of the little world exclusive recipes, if you come to Be.Love.Farm, you can have sometimes, not always, is colostrum ice cream. So
what is that?
When a cow has a calf, and the first couple days of milk is colostrum. All mammals produce colostrum, and it's this
Superfood.
It's this superfood. You know, a lot of bodybuilders and stuff drink it, but it's full of antibodies. It's full of enzymes. It's full of minerals and just superfoods for the calf. In fact, if the calf doesn't get any, it'll die, and its immune system will be compromised for life. But the cow produces more than the calf needs, and so we always take some off, and it's very thick. If you let it settle in a glass jar, it actually has a color like a orange to magenta. It could be orange or magenta color, and it's super creamy and super rich. And we make pudding out of it, and we make ice cream out of it, and it's a world exclusive. I don't know. I've never heard of anyone else making it.
I would say, on our farm, we're kind of known for our sourdough bread and just, the amazing variety of food eaten as close to nature as you can get it. And that's really like the luxury of growing your own food and harvesting it right before you eat it. And we have a little farm store, so we serve our local community, and we also sell some produce to a few local restaurants that aren't our restaurants, but they're just local in our area. So, it's a luscious life.
That truly is. I mean, you're serving as an entire fundamental basis to a lot of people within connection and food. And how do you view that gut intuition connection for yourself? What does that feel like, and how do you interact and make space for that?
Well, I'm happy to go first. I would say, certainly since recovery, but even prior to that, as a child, I would say I've always been obedient to my intuition, and when I'm obedient, miracles happen, and when I'm not obedient, life's more difficult. And I've just learned to trust and listen to that, and it's taken me to some amazing places. And for me, it's the most nourishing relationship and the most inspiring life, because it always leads me into an ever expanding experience of love.
Yeah.
And I would say, it's just a matter of listening and then acting upon it. And it's not 100%. Sometimes I listen to an ego and I act upon that. And sometimes I act upon my intuition, my inner self, my being is what I would call it. And it's just a matter of, being okay with, for me, I've become very okay with, that was an ego. Okay. Or, that was my being. But the most important thing is to listen and act and see. And it's not gonna be 100%, because the ego can get subtler and subtler and subtler, and you can think you're following an ego. I mean, your intuition, your inner self, the being, and sometimes it's just a subtle ego pretending. That's okay. There's the life of a warrior is just acting upon that inner voice and being okay with making mistakes. Oops.
I love that, the life of a warrior.
Sometimes you're going to get tricked.
Yeah, you get blindsided by that ego.
This is Matthew and Terces
signing off
for Guts and Glory.
This was Amen to Abundance with Matthew and Terces Engelhart. Refer to the show notes to further get to know our guest. Share your thoughts and show us some love by subscribing or get in touch to be featured on the podcast. Released every other Monday. Thanks for lending us an ear. Passing on the mic.